Yesterday is Larsen Jensen. Larsen won multiple Olympic medals across multiple Olympic Games. He then went on to serve 2 tours of duty in Afghanistan as a Navy SEAL. He came back to the States, went to the Stanford Graduate School of Business, learned venture capital, and went and worked at some of the most prestigious venture capital firms in the world, Andreessen Horowitz and Lightspeed Venture Partners, before starting his own venture firm, Harpoon VC. In this episode, we talk about passion, navigating troughs, and the inherent difficulty in greatness. I hope you enjoy this episode with Larsen Jensen. Larsen, so excited to have you on the show. Thanks for being here.
Dave, it's nice to be here. Thanks for having me join.
Oh, my pleasure. So before we jump into it, I want to get something out on the plate here. You've been the American dream. Came up as an athlete and a scholar, even though it was USC. Went to the Olympics twice, won a bunch of medals, 2, 3, 4, and 5. I guess 2 and 3 are the medals, but missing that one gold. But then became a Navy SEAL. Went to the best business school in the world, the Stanford Graduate School of Business. Then one of the best venture capital funds in the world, and then used your creativity to start your own and are showing massive success at Harpoon VC. So before we get into the show, let me ask this one genie question. What is the secret? Is it focus? Is it grit? Like, how do we do this?
Yeah, I appreciate the question. And I ask myself that question more frequently than you'd probably imagine. I'd say it's passion more than anything. I think that if you're passionate about what you do and you love what you do, it doesn't feel like work. It doesn't, it's needless to say hard. Like none of the things that you mentioned are easy to accomplish. You are a former swimmer. You know how hard it is to wake up early and go through the grind of 5 a.m. workouts and then go to class and then come back in the afternoon for another ass kicking, because that's what it basically amounts to with the events you swam and I swam. But if you have a passion for it and a love for it, I think that good things follow. Not all the time. There's certainly ups and downs, but I think that that's been the common stitch throughout each of the careers that I've been fortunate to be a part of, is having a genuine passion and love for the craft of what I'm doing, whether that be, in the pool or, in SEAL training, or more recently in the past decade or so in venture capital. I love so many things about these careers. And I think with that, it enables you to push yourself to a level that maybe people who have less of a passion or less of a love are willing to push themselves. So I would say that's what it is for me. But there's plenty of different people who probably have different answers for all of those different career fields.
Well, the passion piece is really interesting. And what I'd want to double click on, not to be too Silicon Valley cliche, is you said there are a lot of things that I love about each of the careers I've been in, but there are definitely things that people don't like about their careers or their jobs. And I'm sure that that's maybe a focus for some people. How do you think about those things that you don't want to do, or are there none? You want to do it all?
I think that's a fallacy. I don't want to do most things that I do. I didn't really enjoy at the time, waking up early every morning and being exhausted and, swimming 10,000 meters in a given practice. That wasn't something I truly loved to do. But unfortunately, it's something that you sort of build a desire to accomplish. So in any case, you just build that passion over time for being with the people that you're with. That concept that I think transcends each of these careers is the concept of just testing myself. I love testing myself, proving to myself more than anybody else that I can accomplish something special. And for whatever reason, maybe it's because I grew up on an almond farm in Central California, that I have this really humble perspective of hard work in and positive outcome potential out. No guarantees, obviously, but that's really been something that's I think become ingrained in me for my whole career. Starting with swimming. So I didn't particularly love swimming for very old school coaches, but I knew that's what I had to do if I was going to fulfill my potential. I don't think anybody goes through Bud's training and loves it in the moment. The old joke is that it's the best time you never want to have again. And I think that similarly, getting admitted to a difficult to access school, or in my most recent incarnation in venture capital, accessing an upper echelon deal where it's very hard to do. It's a lot of rigor that we put into it. for the most part, they're extremely competitive to access. So all of those things are, hard to accomplish, but I love I guess, the human element of overcoming adversity and, working with people that are extremely successful and like-minded in that regard. And I don't think in any of these career fields you find anybody that, rests on their laurels or thinks it's easy. And so I think I gain inspiration from the teammates that I have here at Harpoon, at our venture capital firm, the teammates I certainly had in the SEAL teams, and the teammates I had in college and Olympic athletics. I think that passion can be cultivated in a group setting and really raise the performance of everybody who's involved.
So what got you into swimming as a kid? You said you grew up on an almond farm in California. Was it normal for people to go from the almond farm right to the pool?
Uh, I don't know if it was normal for people to go from the almond farm to the pool, but I think a positive byproduct of growing up in the Central Valley, and I have a lot of appreciation for my upbringing and for the fact that my dad was an almond farmer that was entrepreneurial. He ran his own business. It was farming different than technology investing or forming a technology startup, but the same principles apply, I think. But I think another positive byproduct of it was the fact that it gets hot in the summer. It gets really hot in the Central Valley. And so in the summertime, it's pretty common for kids to go splash around in a backyard pool, either ours or our friends or neighbors, etc. And I think through that, I just became very aquatic in nature. I loved being in the pool, just like every kid I'd ever met does. They love being in the pool to have the opportunity to do so. And, I tried a lot of sports as a kid, did all the normal things, the youth, baseball, football, soccer, etc., but never really felt like I found my calling or the thing that really excited me as much as swimming. And for whatever reason, when I joined the swim team, I think I joined my first swim team, which was late by most people's standards. I think I was 11 years old
Mm.
when I joined my first summer league swim team. And so did two successive summers before, or maybe three before going into high school. And I loved it. I loved the people I was working with. I loved racing. Just like I'm sure kids love, racing, on land and running and things of that nature. I loved racing in the pool, and I became, somewhat addicted to it. And I found that the harder that I worked in the pool, the harder I pushed myself, the better my times would be at the swim meet at the end of the season or intermittently. And so that's something that really, it gave me, I think, a spark to my passion, gave me some positive reinforcement for the sport. And I also think that for me, uniquely, something that I didn't really recognize at the time, but I've taken with me since then, is that it's really hard to have very lofty goals for achievement of what you want to achieve down the road, but break it up into digestible and accomplishable steps that are stepping stones along the way. And I think by accident, I had that growing up in between Shafter and Wasco, California, a rural area where even the Bakersfield guys made fun of me for how rural I was. And, like being in like a bigger city, whether it be in the Bay Area or Southern California, we'd make fun of the Bakersfield guys, and so the Bakersfield guys made fun of me for being in a rural upbringing. I lived in the middle of an almond orchard, literally. But I think what was interesting is I wasn't distracted by what was happening that was outside of my control. I was really focused on our local swim team and our local small municipal swim meets. And through that, I think I was able to not get overly intimidated by what the Bakersfield guys were putting up on the board, or the Fresno guys were putting up on the board, or the Southern California guys were putting up on the board. And so I really was ignorant to it. And, ignorance is bliss, I guess you could say. Almost by accident, I ended up, leveling up from the local Shafter Wasco ecosystem into the Bakersfield ecosystem, which was obviously much larger than my small hometown. And then, subsequently the Central Valley of California, subsequently, which would include Southern California, the, Irvine teams, the Nova Aquatics, the Mission Viejos, et cetera. And ultimately, when you sort of get to that level, you're training with people who are either Olympians or for sure going to be future Olympians. You're training with people that have national age group records for you name the age. The people that were Olympians back in the 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s. And they really have a rich history and culture of accomplishing, extremely high level success. And I think I was fortunate in hindsight to have, you know, no appreciation for that and just the ability to stay focused. I guess pun intended, to stay in my swim lane and to stay focused on the things that I was in control of and not sweat the things that were completely out of my control. Because I think once you get to that next level, it's hard to ignore if somebody's beating you who's an Olympian. It's hard to ignore the national champion. But also, I think that that's infectious when you're ready for it. I think it can come at a significant cost if you're not ready for it. You know what it's like swimming over at Stanford. I mean, if you're ready for it, it's going to level your game up. If you're not, it's pretty darn intimidating. And so I think, unintentionally being sheltered from that in my formative days in the sport was, I think, the right thing that I needed to not have the mental barriers in place that would inhibit my future performance.
So, what did success look like if all you could do was control what was in your swim lane? Was it making the Olympics? Did you have a goal out there? Was it getting a gold? And how did you think about that success next to you thinking, I can only control a very small number of things here?
I think every kid has outlandish goals. But I think that that's the beauty of adolescence. And I think that's the beauty of the human condition. And I think as we grow up, we lose a lot of that, unfortunately. We don't foster it. We learn the limitations. And I think that sucks. I constantly try to shun that every expletive day. Like, I hate that crap and I want to foster it in my own kids. Like, I think it gives me a new appreciation being, I don't know if I'm young or middle aged, but whatever I am, father here, to like help foster that in my kids and say, and not be cliche about it, because I genuinely believe it, because I was fortunate to somehow do it, that you can be whatever you want to be. It's not going to be easy. It takes creativity. It takes iteration. But I think too many people out there are negative and want to tell you what cannot be done versus supporting you in accomplishing something special. You certainly need a dose of reality, but to just out of hand say you're never going to do it or it's rare or whatever, I think is a load of bullshit. And I think that mentality is for weak people versus supportive people. And so as a kid, I do remember watching, I think it was, I don't know if it was the 92 or 90, it must have been the 96 games, and thinking how cool it would be to be an Olympian. But I also wanted to be a pilot. I also wanted to be a Navy SEAL. I also wanted to be an astronaut and all the normal things that, kids really think is cool. But I think too often people give up on their dreams, and I think that's unfortunate. Sometimes they don't have a choice for a variety of reasons, but in other cases, I think it's just societal structure that impedes us from accomplishing the fullness of our potential. So for me in swimming, it really didn't become a goal to go into the Olympics until I was probably midway through high school, which wasn't that far away. I think it was about 3 years away from the 2004 Olympics, where I thought that was something I really wanted to focus on and accomplish. But there was intermittent steps that needed to be done. I needed to make the national team. I needed to obviously be top two in swimming, as you know, and maybe the listeners don't, but generally speaking, you have to get top two in a race or top six in a relay to go to the Olympic Games. So pretty hard. You have to be number two, at least in the United States, in a given event to make it. And U.S. swimming is extremely competitive, the most competitive in the world. But I think that beginner's mind, that childlike naivety about what you can accomplish is something that got me there. And I consistently try to refresh myself of that mentality. Going back to the swimming comment, there was a number of coaches that told me explicitly that I needed to set more realistic goals for myself, because what I was wanting to accomplish was not, possible or unrealistic, required too big of time drops. I recall very specifically similar conversations with people I admire who are mentors of mine, telling me that I was throwing my life away by joining the military, that I was throwing my life away by joining the SEAL teams. And for a variety of reasons, I think that they had that opinion. I had many people who told me, the stats of how hard it is to make it through. Only, 70% quit, 30% make it, and all of these things. And now fast forward into startup land and venture capital investing, probably similar odds. 70% of the companies we invest in aren't going to make it to the promised land. They're not going to make it out the other side to a large scale acquisition or an IPO, but 10 or 20 or 30% will. And I think it's one of the things that I love about this current job that I have and this profession that I have is that the number of failures isn't what matters. It's the magnitude of the successes. And I think if I look back at some of the other things that I did in swimming or even in the SEAL teams, it's similar in many ways. There's daily failures. And I think a lot of times people might look at, just what you rattled off at the beginning of the call, the wave tops, and presume that it's all the tops of the waves without the troughs in between. And the majority of it is troughs. But I think that being willing to go through those troughs and having that self-confidence and I guess appreciation for the journey allows you to really recognize special things. And there's so many adages in the venture capital community and maybe in life in general. Nobody ever remembers your failures. They only remember your successes. I would, if you look through any great venture capitalist in history, nobody ever goes through and says, well, what about this thing that went to zero? What about this person who lost $100 million? They're always talking about the ones that made it really big. And that's what people are known for. And so I think that's another thing that I think should give people and hopefully the listeners confidence that if they're trying to do something that's super aspirational, make sure that it is and make sure that it's worthy of the effort and worthy of the fight. And if you're successful, you'll be remembered for it and people will sort of give you credibility for it. And if you fail, you have another chance to start over and do it again. And so I think that's something that I've taken with me through each of these career changes.
So you want to optimize the upsides and make sure you're navigating those troughs effectively. But these failures that constantly happen because it's mostly failure, in swimming, you might have a bad practice. And the SEAL teams, I'm sure there's, a worse scenario for failures. But then in your venture capital career, that most of the investments you make are likely going to fail. And so much less is in your control than, when you were swimming. So how do you navigate this new world where you have to play in this arena where so much less is in your control? How do you navigate those failures and set yourself up for those milestone successes?
I think that in some ways there is less that we can control. And in some ways it's the same amount of things that are in our control. To staying in your swim lane comment, I couldn't control how fast my competitors went. There is plenty of Olympics, I think, in a handful of the ones in recent memory where I would have been a gold medalist if that was the field that I was up against. Like my time that I got in like '08 or whatever it was would have been like number one on the podium. You can't really control that variability. But I also think there's an allure to me to wanting to compete against people when they're at their best and wanting, the Ian Thorpes and the Grant Hackett's to be in the pool swimming, world record level performances, which I have been in the pool. And I don't really think there's a lot of honor in terms of like beating somebody if they're not having their best performance. Like, did you really win? Is that really, I mean, sure, in terms of the rankings you won, but in terms of that fulfillment, did you really win? And I think that's something that I've thought about a lot in my swimming days and think about now subsequently. So I still think that there's a lot of things that were, out of my control then, but I could control the inputs. I could control my consistency with practices. I could control my nutrition. I could control my work ethic. I could control where I swam, which clubs, which teams, which coaches, which teammates. All of those things are in my control. Now, fast forward to the world of venture capital, I think similarly, we can control the inputs. We can control the amount of rigor that we do. We can control the relationship building that we do. We can control the amount of diligence that we do. We can control the types of people that we prefer to work with in terms of the intangibles or the tangibles in terms of their prior track record and their prior experience. We can control all of those things. But what we can't control is what the world gives us, day N+1 of making the investment. What we've seen in the past year plus has been really a boom in the AI market that I think people smarter than me maybe saw coming, but I think the industry as a whole didn't fully appreciate. Um, and I think that has led to some of the investments we made years ago to have to rethink their business models, to iterate on their product, to adopt new technology. Some have decided that, hey, like the world is fundamentally changed. We're going to step aside and find a soft landing because the value proposition we thought we were going to bring to market, the world has changed so much that it's rendered somewhat obsolete. There's other situations where we've invested in companies where it's been a tremendous accelerant. We invested in an AI security company, I believe it was in 2019. We thought that would be important. We saw that through all these other technology shifts historically, that security is often an afterthought to a new innovation. And we thought that was going to be the case here as well, or there was a possibility of that occurring. And so this market has been a true boon for that company in particular, where they've really been able to grow into this market. So I think it's really interesting that in tech investing and in venture capital, usually in the world of investing, and I think in life in general, most surprises I think people would consider are negative surprises. Like you rarely get sort of like surprised to the upside, I would say, through just pure alchemy. But I think that in this world, that is, if not routine, it's at least possible. Sort of like craft their life for positive surprises to occur, not just negative ones. Really amazing things can happen. And that's how we try to structure our venture capital fund. That's how we try to structure our model, is for those positive surprises to occur. We know how much money we can lose, but at the end of the day, you don't fully know how much money you can make in a given situation if you do things correctly. And that requires a lot of positive externalities. But to your point, we can only control our inputs, just like I controlled my inputs in terms of consistency of swimming. We control our inputs in terms of deal selection criteria and diligence, et cetera. Can't fully control the outputs. And that's, something that I struggle with, right? Maybe I'm sort of I don't know if I'm a control freak or if my passion leads me to take things more personally. It's something I grapple with. But I think it's something that's, it has its pros and its cons, I would say.
When I asked you one time a couple years back, I said, how did you get through these 6 marathons during Hell Week in, Navy SEAL BUDS training, without sleeping and laying in the ocean all night and also carrying 2,000-pound logs over your head all day I was like, how did you do this? Like, how did you like get through that? And your answer was pretty simple. It was, when you're running those marathons that are hell, you don't think about, wow, I have 24 more miles to go. You think about, what's that thing that's 20 meters up ahead of me? I'm going to go all out sprint towards that. And then you just keep repeating that process over and over. That's really stuck with me. And something that I have had trouble with, in my career, and I've heard of friends having similar trouble, is how do you figure out what that bush is that's 20 meters up ahead of you that you can sprint at? And how do you know that's in the right direction while you're navigating the career?
I think that in SEAL training or in the swimming pool, it's much more clear because you have the physical manifestation of what that is. Yeah. You can see it and you could potentially touch it when you get there, so on and so forth. But I think it's one of the things that they teach any new white shirters, they're called, the person who shows up day one to SEAL training, to BUDS training, is that concept of, taking things one step at a time, really one meal at a time. Just get to lunch, get to dinner, get to mid-rats, which is sort of like the food you get at midnight in Hell Week. Try and break it up into as small of a bite as possible with that future reward that is likely going to be there. And if that's too far away, then just literally take it 100 yards, 50 yards, or even in the direst of circumstances, one step at a time. I think that one of the things that they taught us is that, the pain is going to end at some point, somehow. It's not perpetual. And I think that if you put yourself in the mental framework that it's never going to end, that can lead you to like really big mental traps. And so I think in my own career, thinking through career changes, thinking through the right time to join a firm or to start one, um, it's very uncomfortable. And you never really know for sure if you're making the right call. But that anxiety, that pain, that uncertainty will end at some point, and you will be through that. And I think layering on top of that, um, I think it's an important lesson for people to recognize about themselves that the human body can take a lot. The human mind can take a lot, especially if you condition it. Um, it's really hard to kill a person. It's not at the level you generally think that it is. Going through Hell Week, you learn that about yourself. Um, because I think most people would think that they're going to die after 3 days of no sleep and exerting themselves to that level. And that's just purely not the case. By the time you finish Hell Week, I think everybody would sort of have the appreciation that they could go further. I don't know how much further they could go, but they could go further, certainly. And that's really I don't want to say a confidence boosting type of thing, but it's a good context setting situation to be in, is that you always have another gear. The best coaches in the world teach you that in sports and specifically in swimming. There's always another gear that you can find. The question is, can you really find it? And are you going to throw in the towel because it's too hard before you get there? And so I think that oftentimes, it's darkest right before the light, as they say. And I think that just having that confidence, if not in the perfect decision, but the fact that this will pass as well, is something that has led me to be more confident when I'm uncomfortable, which again is nearly every day, for better or worse.
Yeah, that's amazing. I love that framework of the pain is going to end, and you can take a lot. I think I'm interested in hearing what you had to learn going from being an Olympic top level swimmer to when you went to the SEALs. And then I'm also going to ask, what did you have to unlearn during that transition? And then we'll do the same thing from the SEALs into business. And
Yeah.
I would guess that one of the things is the pain that you have to endure during Hell Week or during the SEALs it's relatively short term compared to maybe in venture. It might be 5 years, or it might be even a year, which is a long period of time as
Yeah.
opposed to just a week. So I want to get to that, but maybe we can start with going from swimming to the SEALs. What did you have to learn, and what did you have to unlearn?
Well, I mean, the culture and the motto of the SEAL teams is that the only easy day was yesterday. And I think that's an interesting comment to dissect. And essentially what it means is there's never going to be an easy day. And the only one that you should ever think was easy is the one that you've already accomplished. And so I think that, from a macro standpoint, informs the fact that, yes, it's very hard for a specific period of time, but the expectation is that it's going to be hard in the future. And you shouldn't sort of, take that for granted. And so I think that relates into venture. I think it relates into swimming. But in terms of the things that I had to unlearn from swimming, I think that the career choice made that easy by default. In other words, I think it's really hard for me, for anybody who feels like they've done something that's unique or special, to then start completely over and be at the bottom of the barrel. And by design, that's how the military works. Like you go to boot camp, go to Naval Academy, you go to, officer candidate school, you go into SEAL training. Regardless of what the starting point is, you start at a bottom of the barrel peon that needs to prove themselves and needs to work their way up. And any prior accomplishments or sense of ego really doesn't have a place in the military community when you're starting, certainly, because there's people that have accomplished a lot in that domain, who are tremendously brave and selfless and team oriented, who have been awarded Navy Stars, Medal of Honor, et cetera. And like all of these things are extremely humbling, to put it politely. And so I think a mistake that some people I've seen make, and either by accident or design, I don't think I did, is coming into the SEAL teams with a chip on your shoulder, thinking that you are owed anything. or that you deserve anything. I think if anything, I went into it thinking that I was going to have a target on my back from the instructor staff to make it harder on me, because I know how I would feel if I were them. I'd want to crush me, because it wipe any sense of ego out. And so I think that that's what I experienced, to be honest. But I think that there's a lot of commonalities. I would say swimming for an old school type of coach that was like 70s era, 80s era coach of like, max yardage, work your tail off. If you don't, you're weak, that kind of thing. Or football players that do two-a-days and all that kind of stuff. I think that sort of mentality is what you get going into the SEAL teams. It's not that, and I think that that's because those coaches, in my opinion, arguably care the most. It's like those instructors who aren't going to let you cut corners care the most, because they care about your own personal performance in the or in the swimming context, or in the military context. They know if they let people through that are cutting corners, that's going to cost lives. And I think it's, not to be too philosophical about it, but it's the same thing in parenting. If you let your kids eat whatever they want and watch whatever they want and have zero discipline, what do you expect your kids to grow up to be? Like, there's that whole adage of nature versus nurture, but that nurture component is extremely important. And so if you proverbially let your kids get away with murder, they're going to grow up to be serial killers, and I know that's the extreme example. So I think it's actually really important. I think the parents that care the most are the ones that provide, significant limitations and guidance. Same thing with the coaches, and the same thing with the BUDS instructors. And so I think for me, it naturally, as part of that ecosystem, provided that for me, that humbling effect, and that opportunity to completely start over with a clean slate, for lack of a better term, but also bringing with me that that mental toughness that was ingrained in me from prior coaches that I swam with and teammates that I saw do tremendous things. Similar. We shared many of the same teammates, as you know. Mm-hmm. Or I wouldn't say the SEAL that career transition mentality from making it to the Olympics to the SEAL teams, but you got to start like way down here, man, to then moving laterally into another career. It's not really lateral at all. You really have to start from a level of humility and cognizance of the road ahead with that beginner's mind. And I think a pitfall that I see a lot of people fall into, and I've fallen into, so this is definitely the pot calling the kettle black, is this sort of, you're not going to be an Olympic medalist and then be the equivalent of that in your new role day one. It's really, really, really hard for people to rewind the clock to the raw ingredients that got you to be an Olympian in the first place, that got you to be, got you through BUDS and into the SEAL teams in the first place. And basically saying to yourself, I'm going to go through this new version of BUDS to prove that to myself, more than anybody, that I am worthwhile in this industry. And I'm going to attack it with the same beginner's mind, curiosity, and first principles that I did previously in this last role. It's really a difficult pill to swallow. But I think the people that have successfully made a career change have oftentimes done that. And I don't want to be dismissive of the fact that you can sort of like use, I think prior successes do help to establish credibility with some of the intangibles. But at the end of the day, industry expertise is only gained through firsthand experience.
Is there anything that you had to unlearn from your transition from the SEALs to, being a venture capitalist, being a businessman?
Yeah, a lot. A lot. At the end of the day, government jobs are inherently bureaucratic. It is nearly impossible to get fired from one unless you get a DUI or do something catastrophic. The private sector is not like that. There's no security blanket of employment, certainly in startup land. Maybe at larger scale companies that are more akin to a government bureaucracy, there might be, but it's a different dynamic. In the military, at least at present day, you're not getting early promotions. There's no such thing as a 25-year-old admiral. who's in charge of the Pacific Fleet. But in venture capital and in startups, there's 25-year-old billionaires that transform industries. So I think unlearning the concept of linear career progression is something that's challenging. I think that it uniquely exists in entrepreneurship more so than other industries, where the prospect of self-creation or creating a new company, creating a new technology, creating a new business is possible. And I think in the government setting, that's purely not. You're not going to get promoted earlier. You might garner more respect. Certainly, any rank can, receive any, battlefield award for what they've done. But that doesn't mean that you're given responsibility 10 pay grades ahead of you. So I think that that's something that I had to, I don't know if it was unlearn, but just get, reflect and have a different appreciation for and different context for.
Okay, awesome. And you recently, I do want to touch on that. So in the military, there are a bunch of these, or there are no promotions. There isn't early, success as I'm now leading this massive team. But in entrepreneurship, I mean, you could jump right in. Obviously, you have an incredible resume, but you said, I'm going to start this thing. And you raised some money for it. And you recently raised $125 million after becoming a venture capitalist, what, 4, 5, 6 years ago? Just a couple of years.
Something like that. Yeah.
Which is unbelievable. How do you operate your firm like the military, if at all, or is it completely different?
I'd say it's completely different, and maybe that's unfair. And it can't be completely different because we're all a byproduct of our former experiences. So you should talk to the guys here and see. But I think there's aspects to it that we try to bring, that unit cohesiveness, that extreme responsibility, that delegation of authority, giving people more responsibility than maybe they are ready for. I think is something that the SEAL teams and special operations, broadly speaking, is uniquely capable of. And we try to bring that here, that decentralization of command and decision making, because I don't think an organization really can make great decisions if it's all singularly, led by one person. But you're right. I think that very similar to my story about the coaches that said it was a bad idea or impossible to make it to the Olympics. Very similar to, mentors of mine that told me I was throwing my life away in the SEAL teams. I had numerous professors and mentors of mine in the venture capital space that said, good luck raising your first fund, which we did in the 2018, 2019 frame. It's a hard time to raise money. Your value proposition isn't different enough. You don't have enough of a track record. And maybe similar to growing up on the almond farm, ignorance is bliss. You don't really know what you're up against. But I think that we had the concept and the mentality at one point of burning the ships. There's no path back to the old world. We need to go forward here in the new, and there's no option. Necessity is the mother of invention, as they say. And I believe that to this day. If you don't have any alternative, there's only one thing that you need to troubleshoot. And I think for us, as we started our firm in the late teens, in the 18, 19 timeframe, we, crawl, walk, run. Like we raised a little bit of money. We deployed it into some companies that enabled prospective new investors to see the types of deals that we were doing and to form a better informed opinion, not only about our thesis, but our ability to execute. And then we had a couple year investment period there, continued to raise money again in 21, and then here in 23 again. So it was definitely something that I think a lot of those experiences related into this, but it is a completely different animal. It is ruthlessly capitalist. We need to be, because the people that have invested in us are pension funds of public employees, pension funds of first responders that risk their own lives and expect to be taken care of on the back end of that as a result of it. Nonprofits, foundations, etc., to say nothing of all the family, friends, professors, etc. So it is a huge degree of responsibility that we have. And I think that allows for us to have a singularity of vision of what our responsibility really is. It's certainly different than representing your country on the playing field or the swimming pool. It's certainly different than representing your country on the battlefield, but we're still representing our public servants here directly, financially. And that's something that I think gives us a sense of mission and purpose to continue moving forward when things are challenging.
And that mission and purpose piece is how it seems like you're aligning the team on moving forward. All of your actions need to be around the service of these people who are benefiting from public pension plans, first responders, et cetera. But in terms of the actual teamwork and leadership that you provide, I know that, teams, they call them the teams, the SEAL teams.
Yeah,
Swimming is less of a team, and then you kind of needed to
sure.
adopt this team mentality. Can you talk to me a little bit about how you did adopt that mentality from swimming, and now how you are aligning these people and helping them understand their roles and goals as it feeds into the mission of
Yeah.
your firm?
I think one of the most challenging things of starting a company, a firm, a startup is that concept of mission and team and collaboration. And it's something that I think I might be a little bit of at odds with some of my other colleagues from special operations and the SEAL teams. Um, a lot of those folks that I know well want to talk a lot about leadership, which is important, and they have a lot of experience doing it. I think that the military form of leadership is generally best applicable to an established organization. At the end of the day, I inherited the culture and reputation of the SEAL teams. I inherited in my swimming days the culture and reputation of USC swimming. I inherited the reputation of US Team USA in the swimming pool as well. I didn't build that from scratch. And I think that is something that's really challenging is how do you start from zero and create a new culture where the infrastructure is not built around you. At the end of the day, there is a sorting mechanism to making it into the SEAL teams, which is buds. And most people don't make it. That's a sorting mechanism to have the shot to sort of like go there and be a positive contributor. And that is something that's really hard to institute as a small firm, really hard to institute as a small company. And that's something that I think we can certainly improve upon is having a strong culture. But at the end of the day, it's incumbent on me and other people that are here, the playing, build out that mentality and that franchise. And it's not for everybody. Um, it's not. And I think being comfortable with that is also challenging. The civilian workplace would not tolerate a buds selection process. Um, so you also need to, I think, be, I guess stubborn enough, but, flexible in the dynamic. And I think that's something that we're still learning. We're still trying to improve on. And my goal is to, not only build this firm, but make it something amazing that in 10 or 20 years, people can walk into and inherit something that was started from zero and started from scratch. And hopefully some of the lessons learned and some of the experiences that I was fortunate to have previously, provide for some of that foundation.
I was just going to ask, what differentiates you from other professionals? A bunch of different people are trying to do this or trying to start companies. They're trying to start firms. Obviously, not everyone has that, the Olympic and Navy SEAL pedigree and mentality. But what is it specifically that differentiates you from the others out there?
There's a lot of tangible things or quantitative things that we like to say that we offer founders in terms of our partnership that's beyond capital. And ultimately, we think that that's part of the reason why LPs are attracted to us. Limited partners, investors, and venture funds are attracted to us. Historically, that's been an understanding of how to take innovations coming out of Silicon Valley and help them sell to or through into the government channel. When we founded Harpoon, it was under the thesis that this modern incarnation of technology was going to have further reaching geopolitical and national security considerations than at any other time in my lifetime. And for context, I'm 38. So, and I think that's sort of played out. It's played out faster than I would have expected, and we'll see where it continues. But these advancements in AI, advancements in robotics, advancements in cybersecurity, advancements in cloud and data infrastructure, advancements in biotechnology and space technology, all of these theme areas are now intersecting much, much more with government considerations, either as a customer or as something you need to consider, especially as it's become contentious between the United States and China and other countries around the world. And so I think that was the formative thesis that we had, that we launched under, and we still hang our hat on. But interestingly, everybody says their business is a people business. I really think that ours is maybe the epitome of that. When we are looking to work with somebody, it's oftentimes 2 to 10 people who are brilliant and an idea, and maybe something that works a little bit, but it's not ready. And they have a big vision on how they're going to change an industry with a technology enabled change. There's not a whole lot there other than personal chemistry and getting to know each other and choosing us based on the people we are to be the partner that they work with. The same thing could be said on the other side of the coin, on the limited partner side, the side that invests in venture capital funds. Sure, they can look at track record, they can look at thesis, but at the end of the day, they're trusting me, they're trusting us to be fiduciaries of their capital and to make the best decisions we can to help their capital grow. It is a very people-centric business. And so I think for us, it's really important that we recognize that and that we give the appropriate level of, focus on that. Sure, we could we could do better at branding. We could, do the Pepsi versus Coke versus whatever. We could, hang our hat on value proposition and what we're for sure going to do with you, or we're going to try to do with you. But interestingly, in my decade or so in venture, it's been people oriented. They either like you and trust you and believe that you're going to be a good partner to them, that you're going to be honest, authentic, transparent, fair, above board. And that's, I think, what matters more than any of that other stuff. I think the value prop is what gets you the meeting. Showing who you are is what wins you the partnership. And I think that's really the most important part of it. It's not the thing that's going to be a flashy thing on a website or on a slick sheet. But I think that venture capital at the end of the day is sales and partnership. And that's what we really spend a lot of our time thinking about.
I think something that's really interesting about this is I asked you a question around, what differentiates you, and you didn't even think twice. You thought about the we. Well, how are we differentiated? And I think that might be exactly what it is. It's we are a team. We are going to service you, and the character that we have is what you are going to buy into. And I think that's badass. What advice do you have for kids starting companies or 30-year-olds who are working in tech and trying to do stuff on their own, asking for a friend? What advice do you have for us?
No matter what you start or what you do, it's going to be hard. Stop tricking yourself otherwise. It's going to be hard. I think that we glamorize entrepreneurship. We cherry pick the examples and show the successes of the Steve Jobs and, the Elon Musks and all of this stuff. And I think Elon's been on the record more times than I could possibly count about what it's like to start a company, and that it's, staring at the edge of the abyss and chewing glass. And I think that there is this misnomer about it. And I think it's been interesting to me as I talk to a lot of other venture funds out there and other entrepreneurs out there, how people sort of, brush over that as being part of the journey. And so I would say if I have any advice, if you're going to dedicate yourself to something, um, make sure it's a worthwhile undertaking that's going to fulfill you and it's going to make you truly happy. And I'm not trying to say that that's something where it's follow your passions and great things will come, because there's a lot of bad ideas and things that are passions that are toxic, like very bad
Yeah.
passions. So I think, there's nuance to what I'm saying, and it's easy to sort of like shoot holes in it. But my point is, if you're going to start something, and starting something small is just as hard as starting something big. So reflect on what you're actually trying to achieve and who you're trying to do it with, and make sure that you have the interest, love, and passion to carry you through the inevitable roller coaster of life. I think something I've been consistently trying to work on is this appreciation for the path that I'm on. And I've previously thought that if I just won an Olympic medal, I would be, I don't know the right word, happy, satisfied. Just, earned the SEAL trident and got to be a part of that community, I would be satisfied, and that would do it. Just got into a good school, and that would be it. Just got a good job at a great firm, that would be it. That just starting one and getting a fund off the ground, and that would be it. Guess what? That's not the case. Like, it's not the case at all. And so I think that this summer I allowed myself some time to sort of just think deeply about it. And something that really landed on me that a mentor told me is that yesterday's tomorrow is today. And throughout each of our careers, Dave, we've had this concept of delayed gratification, and that you're always working hard for a better tomorrow for yourself, for your family, for your country, sacrificing today so that tomorrow is better. At what point is it tomorrow? Maybe that's now. And so I think for me, recalibrating to an appreciation for the moment, regardless of what comes my way, and just understanding that we're all on this journey together of life that is finite, that is going to end. And that if you spend too much time worrying about tomorrow, the kids are going to be out of the house, your early professional years are going to be gone, and you're going to wish you had yesterday back. And I'm spending a lot of time mulling that over and making sure that I'm as present as I possibly can be, professionally, personally, so on and so forth. Because it's never going to get easier. There's always going to be a curveball. The only easy day truly was yesterday. So spend your life with people you love and a career that you enjoy, and where you can get fulfillment for making a difference in whatever way that can be.
I'm feeling extremely motivated, and I also want to dive in deep into tactics, but I think there's definitely going to need to be an episode 2. This is badass. We have this last little exercise, the 3-minute rapid fire questions.
All right.
I don't even want to ask them compared to the quality of stuff that you were just saying, but we're going to do it anyway to give anyone who's listening an idea of who Larsen Jensen is. So it's going to alternate fun and deep. So here we go. Question number 1. What's the first thing you do when you wake up in the morning?
Coffee, then workout.
Okay, good. 2, what's your go-to comfort food?
Chocolate chip cookies and chips and salsa.
Oh, nice. Sweet and savory. 3, can you name a book that has significantly impacted your life?
I think I have a couple. The Endurance, the story of Ernest Shackleton and his voyage to explore Antarctica. Unbelievable story of overcoming human adversity. If you haven't read it, it's for sure, I would say, my favorite book.
And seal blubber.
Yeah, exactly. And other than that, like in college, I read How to Win Friends and Influence People. And I would say that one actually at that time in my life did change my life.
Awesome. 2 to start with. 4, if you could teleport anywhere in the world right now, where would it be?
Hanalei Bay, Kauai. I love that place. It's awesome.
You going to surf there?
I'm not much of a surfer. I like to say,
All right.
like, I'm more of an in the water aquatic animal versus on top of, or when it's frozen. My wife can attest to that. When it's frozen, it's all bets are off.
Okay. All right. 5. What's one mental model or frame of thinking that if you didn't learn, you would be less happy and less fulfilled? I feel like you named 30 during this episode, but if there's one that comes to mind.
I'd go back to the roots. The simple answer: the start small, limit your aperture, dominate the thing that you're really passionate about, and work out in concentric circles, and you'd be surprised what you can accomplish.
All right. 6. What's one song that always gets you pumped up no matter what?
Right Now by Van Halen.
Nice. If you hadn't pursued swimming, would your life look any different?
100%.
Okay. What?
Entirely different. Entirely different. I wouldn't have gone to USC. I wouldn't have met my wife. I wouldn't have the beautiful kids that I do. Yeah, likely wouldn't be here doing what I'm doing with you today. So it all comes back to those early decisions.
And following that passion a little bit to circle
Absolutely.
it back. Okay, 2 more. What's one famous person or historical figure you'd like to have lunch with if you could?
Thomas Jefferson.
Good one. And then finally, you've probably heard this one if we share podcast interests, but what's the kindest thing anyone has ever done for you?
As with what most people would say, there's probably too many to count. The people that take a chance on me when I felt like I didn't deserve it. I've had people that not only have given me jobs, given me apprenticeships, given me, most importantly, time and advice when I didn't know what I was doing. I still don't know what I'm doing, but I think that I'm cognizant about trying to repay that as best I can. And so I think that's a pretty common thing that any guest you probably have would say, is those people that go out of their way without any selfish bone in their body to try and help you figure out who you are, makes a world of difference. I hope more people do things like that.
Yeah, and I can attest to you going out of your way, not just for this episode, but also you've had a bunch of conversations with me that I really appreciate. So thank you so much, Larsen. It was awesome talking to you today.
Dave, it's good seeing you, man. Thanks for having me.
All right. See you later. That's a wrap for this episode with Larsen Jensen. I hope you enjoyed the conversation. And if you did, please like and follow the show on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or directly on my website, adavenolan.com. Please share it with one person if you thought of them during the show. Thanks for tuning in.